Harvey, yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to start with the learning sponsors, and then that will get us a little closer. So, okay. Year of Learning by Sue and Arnie Gerlich. In memory of Malka Perlman and Philip Mann, and Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Beryl ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Yosef Meir ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Henya Rivka Pro Rosner bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch. And in memory of family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Cheryl Scher, her children and grandchildren. In memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva. Marcia Federbush and family. In memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon. Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends. In memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edel Bas Yaakov. Leslie and Gail Kaplan. In memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Siddell, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan. Friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, and Martha Gitler, Charna bat Yeshaya. Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov, in her memory. Friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef. Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim. Charlie Gelfenstein and Sam Levine, in memory of Ramona Levine, Rachel Mata bat Asher. Have a month of learning by Mordechai and Miriam Burr, in memory of his father, Yaakov ben Mordechai. Friends from Yarmouth E, in memory of Miriam and Michael Schiffer's son, Zev David ben Shimon Halevi. David and Mindel Cheslow, in memory of his mother, Bela Bas Meir. Marcia Federbush, in memory of her husband, Oriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon. Gary and Marcia Schrager, in memory of his father, David ben Yosef, and his mother, Freda Bas Hendel. And Dov Budlander, in memory of his parents, Tzvi ben Yaakov Yitzchak, and Bela Drasha Bas Harav Dober, and his in-laws, Yehuda Tzvi ben David Nachum, and Alta Chaya Bas Avram Yosef. We have a week of learning by Vicky Rubinovich Fish and Larry Fish. In memory, oh, that doesn't start, what's today, is the 6th, right? Yeah. Okay, in memory of her mother, Ita Bat Tzvi, and her father, Chaim Zusya ben Shlomo ben Tzion. Also today, a week of memory by Michael and Judy Poretsky, in memory of his father, Gershon ben Chaim Tzvi. Okay, for Shabbos, we have a Day of Learning plus Torah Fund by Gail and Milton Meller, in memory of her father, Aye Leib ben Tzvi Hirsch. And also a Day of Learning plus Torah Fund for Shabbos by Mel Grossman, in honor of the marriage of his granddaughter, Tova Rachel Grossman, to Hillel Weinberger. Shamas have an aliyah, Kranker Rafia, Velti Yeshua Shemat Aliyah, and those celebrating a simcha, may they have much joy and happiness together. Okay. All right, is that okay?
Good morning.
Good morning. That's Steve. I assume Harvey will be getting on momentarily. Right? Okay. If you're using Art Scroll, we're in volume 2 of Sukkah. Okay. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to quickly review, and then we'll jump into today's learning. Okay. We have based our discussion initially on a comparison between the fact that the Psukim tell us to observe Sukkot, and therefore the first 2 Parakim of the Masechet deal with various questions about a sukkah. Since the Torah does not spell that out, it asks questions about height, about schach, about walls, etc. Okay. Now that we get to new Perek, okay, we're told about another mitzvah associated with the holiday. Okay, lulav the arba minim, right? Thank you. Yeah. And so, but here too, the psukim don't necessarily spell out all the details. And so therefore the Mishnah and the Gemara is going to go into some of those. Our first Mishnah already reminded us that a dried out lulav or a stolen lulav or a lulav that comes from a tree that is prohibited because of idol worship, things like that, are forbidden. Okay, that we must bind the lulav in some manner. Okay, and then we're told afterwards that the palm branches coming from Iron Mountain, wherever that location is, right, are acceptable. Right? And so therefore that I suggested yesterday was our first hint that the lulav should clearly come from palm branches. Okay. We then when we finished Kaftet Amud Beis, okay, we came to the point, Ma Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, okay, Mishum Dahava Le Mitzvah Haba'a Ba'avera, that the reason a stolen lulav is not permissible is because one obtains it by illicit means, inappropriate means. Okay? Shneamar vehevetim gazu et hapiseach ve'et hacholeh, citing the pasuk that says you should bring the stolen, the lame, and the sick, and the implication is animal. In other words, that a lame animal as an offering is not acceptable, okay? And likewise, therefore, a stolen animal is not acceptable. That's what we derive from that passage, okay? So the Gemara then continues on third line on Lamed Amud Aleph. Harvey, you with us yet? Okay. All right. So what happens? Yeah. All right. It says Gazul Dumia de Piseach, that a stolen lulav is similar to, okay, or a stolen animal, let's put it that way, is similar to a lame animal. Ma Piseach lit le tekanta, the same way that a lame animal has no remedy. Af Gazul lit le tekanta. So therefore a stolen object a stolen animal has no remedy, implying that a stolen lulav is problematic. Now, a quick review, and correct me if I'm wrong. All right, when someone steals an object, what must they do? They must ideally return the same object plus pay a knas. Okay? If that object that was stolen has become changed in any major form, okay, that shinui implies that there is a new owner to that object. It's a king, okay? So having stated that, we need to sort of keep that a little bit in mind in the back of our discussion, okay? So the Gemara picks up, lo shna lefnei yeush, v'lo shna la'achar yeush. And therefore, since there's no remedy, there doesn't make a difference where the owners have despaired or have not despaired.
Yeah, because when you stole it, you pick it up or you pull it. So if the owner is miyayish, if he says, "Oh, yeah, I'll never get it back," then lemafreya, your act became a kinyan and you owned it.
Right.
But with a korban, even though it's halachically yours, you still can't bring
it. Right. Okay. Bishlema lefnei yeush. So Gemara picks up to respond to that statement. That's understandable if we're saying that the owners have not given up hope. Let's put that way, okay? Adam ki yakriv mikem amar Rahmana, because the pasuk says a person who offers from, I'm going to translate it, your own, says the Torah. Velavdi dehu, and it is not his own. Okay. Ela la'achar yeush. But what about after having given up hope? Hakniya b'yeush. Here, don't we have an example of once the owner gives up hope, it becomes a valid kinya. Okay. Ela lav mishum dahavale mitzvah haba'a ba'avera. But rather, isn't it because it becomes the performance of a mitzvah done through a transgression, right? Va'amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who says as follows: My dichtiv, what is it written in the Torah? Ki ani Hashem ohev mishpat, sonei gezel ba'olah. Okay, I translating when I'm right. That basically indicating, I wanted to quote the translation, okay, that the Art Scroll has here. For I am Hashem who loves justice, who hates robbery in an Olah offering. Isn't that the question? All right. So the example now the Gemara gives us, Mashal Lamelech Basar Vadam, a parable to a flesh and blood king, Shahaya over al Beit Hameches, that he was traveling on the road and he came to a station that collects taxes. Tobel, okay? Right, what happens? Amar la'avadav, and he says to his servants, Tanu mikem lemochasim. You right. All right, okay. Tanu meches lemochasim. Pay the tax, to pay the toll. Okay? And they respond to him. Amrulo, v'halo kol hameches kulo shelchahu. Doesn't all the taxes, the tolls, go to you? So why should you have to pay? Okay, Amar lahem. He responded, Mimeni yomadu, kol ovrei drachim. From me, and he says, other passers, other travelers will learn. Okay, v'lo yavrichu atzmam min hameches, and they will not, won't skip the toll booths. Okay, that's why we do it by toll plates today. Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu Amar. So likewise, the Hashem says, Ani Hashem sonei gezel ba'olah, and therefore the pasuk citing that I Hashem hate any kind of robbery with regards to this offering. Right? Mimeni yomadu b'nei. No. I'm translating. The text says olah specifically, but the concept is what we're trying to get at.
Contextually, God owns everything. If you own it, if I own it, what's the difference? God did it. So why shouldn't he accept all of it? It's not from me, it's from you. So God says, I'm trying to teach my people a lesson. If I don't like stuff, won't take something stolen, they won't steal.
In other words, it's a moral lesson. If I dislike robbery, it comes to teach you that you should also dislike any acts of thievery. Okay. All right. Mimeni yomadu b'nei banai. From me, my children will learn. V'yavrichu atzmam min hagezim. I like that phrase. And they will flee, distance themselves from robbery. Itmar. Now, Itmar Nami, it was also said as follows. Amar Rabbi Ami, he says as follows, Yavesh Pasul.
Is it true that
I don't know.
What
I
is
don't
it?
know. I've never been involved.
No.
I don't know.
Hey, that's a Yiddish.
That's right.
That's not a lot.
I don't think it's a lot, right? Okay, so what happens? He says, we come back to the dry lulav, right? It's possible. Mipnei she'ein hadar, because we could also say it doesn't satisfy the requirement of hadar. Okay, now I won't go in. Let's go on from here. Gazul pasul mishum dahavale mitzvah ba'a ba'avera, and the stolen lulav therefore is invalid, right? Because it is a mitzvah that is done through a transgression. But the Gemara comes and tells us the following: Upliga the Rabbi Yitzchak, and this seems to be an argument with what was said by Rabbi Yitzchak. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachmani, who says Amar Shmuel in the name of Shmuel. What does he say? Lo shanu ela biyom tov rishon. This was only taught in regards to the first day of the holiday, right? Because it says, remember in the pasuk, ulekachtem lachem biyom harishon. Okay, so aval biyom tov sheni mitoch sheyotze b'shaul yotze nami begazul. But on the second day of Yom Tov, it might appear, I'm going to say, that since you can satisfy your obligation through using a borrowed lulav, right? Why shouldn't you also be able to satisfy your obligation with a stolen lulav?
Borrowed without permission.
Okay, now what happens? Meitiv Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. And so Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak responds with an answer. Lulav hagazul v'hayavesh pasul. A lulav that is stolen and a one that is dry is invalid. Hashaul kasher. Okay, but one that it is borrowed is valid. All right, emat. Why is this the case? Ilema biyom tov rishon. If I say we're talking about the first day of Sukkot, haktiv lachem, but isn't it not written specifically in the pasuk, lachem, to you, right? Mi shelachem, it must belong to you, right? V'hai, okay, and this borrowed lulav is what I'm going to say here. Lavdi dehu, it's not his. Ela lav biyom tov sheni, but rather is it not in regards to the second day of Yom Tov? Ukatani gazul pasul, and it's taught there, okay, in the Mishnah, right? That it teaches that clearly a stolen lulav is forbidden. So now Rav is going to give a slightly different explanation. Okay, Rav Amar. L'olam b'yom tov rishon. He says, no, it doesn't just apply to Yom Tov Sheni. It can apply to Yom Tov Rishon. Okay, all right, and right. V'lo mebaye ka'amar, and we're using the literary format. Okay, of a lo mebaye. All right, and this is what we're going to say as follows. Right, namely, lo mebaye. Shaul, the lavdi dehu. We don't have to say, okay, that it referring to a borrowed one, that since it's not his. Aval gazul, but regarding a stolen one, eze ema stam gzela. I would say that is in regards to the general robbery, right? Yeush ba'alimhu. That's dependent upon the situation of the despair, okay, a lack of hope of the owners.
Which is a normal concept.
Okay, which is a requirement for something regarding the whole issue of robbery, of thieving. Okay, ukadidei dami, and therefore it would be like his. Kamash Malan comes to teach us that's not the case. Okay, now let's go on to a new piece. All right. Now, Amar laho Rav Huna lahinhu avan kare. Rav Huna said to the following merchants, okay, namely the following: Ki zavin nitu asa me'akum. When it comes, you merchants, and you buy myrtle branches from Gentiles, okay. Lo tigzozu atun you shall not cut it yourselves. Ela ligzoza inhu v'yahavu lechu. But rather, you have them cut it, and then they
Give it to you.
give it over to you. My tama, what's the reasoning? Stam ovdei kochavim gazlane aratamin. Because we're saying that there is a common understanding that people that are worship idols generally may steal the land on which,
Provenance of ownership.
okay, which the myrtle trees grow on. Okay, let's go over now. The karka eina nigzelet, but we hold that land cannot be stolen. In other words, land always returns to its original owner. Right? Hilkach legzuza inhu. Therefore, he says, okay, the question is, okay, let them cut those myrtle branches. Okay? Ki hechi de lahavu yeush ba'alim biyadaihu didahu. Okay, and in that case, we will say that the despair will be in the hands of basically in
When
the owners.
when the
Okay, and
real
there,
owner is
well, hold on, Mike, hold on. Okay, what is the Gemara trying to say? Hechi de lahave yeush, when there will be
when
this,
the original
when the owners, like, in other words, those who had been the earlier owners of the land, not because we're assuming that these other akum are squatters, stealers, whatever, okay? What happens? Biyadahu didu. Okay, in that case, all right, it will be in the hands of those,
So he's
Cut
cutting
it.
it from the bush.
right? Those, it'll be in the hands of the cutters,
Correct.
okay, and not in,
So that
Yeah.
he is the.
so that the merchants, right? So the merchants won't be considered the thieves of taking property that have earlier owners. Okay, now, so the Gemara picks up here. Vishinui harishut biyadaichu. Okay, but don't we say here that this change of possession is in their hands? Okay, doesn't that make it a kinyan in their part? Sof ki gazazu anvachayu lahavu yeush ba'alim biyadaihu. Ultimately, he says, what happens that if the merchants cut the twigs themselves, okay, the despair will still be on the part of the original owners, and as a result, the merchants will therefore be,
The Jews who buy from the merchant.
no, wait. If the merchants were to cut it,
Then they'd become.
they would be the one.
But that's.
They would be-
That's mitzvah bo ba'avera.
That, or I was going to say, I was going to phrase it differently. They would be considered the ones stealing it.
Right.
They would be considered the thieves, and as a result, wait, Sam, wait.
That's okay.
wait a second. So they would then be considered the thieves, and therefore it would be inappropriate because they would be obtaining it, okay, as a mitzvah ba'avera.
So then the Gemara says, but the
Whoa,
buyer-
hold on. Wait a second, don't jump ahead, okay? Okay. So what happens? So in other words, this is the explanation of why he did not want the merchants themselves to cut the myrtle branches. So the Gemara, it still raises a question. If you're performing an act, okay, in this case, because you're cutting the branches off the tree, and you're ultimately going to use it for another purpose, okay, would that be considered like the kinyan? Okay. Vishinui harishut biyadan. But aren't we saying then that there's a change of possession in that situation?
And they sell it. To
Okay.
the end user.
Not yet,
That's you selling it to the end user.
not yet. Okay. Vishinui harishut. This is the question. Lo sricha bahoshana the anvarche gufai. Okay, so then the Gemara says something that Rav's Huna is such, okay, but aren't the twigs going to be used then by these merchants
when they make their own.
when they make their own lulav and esrog? Okay, so isn't that changing the nature of it enough to consider it that it's different rishus? Okay, hold on. All right, the anvarchayu gufay veliknuye b'shinui ma'aseh, and therefore aren't they acquiring it by a change in this deed, in this action?
By tying it up.
Okay, by using it as the lulav and esrog. Okay, so isn't that enough to say that as a challenge to Rav Huna, that were the merchants to cut it themselves and make it into their own lulav and esrog? Isn't that enough of a change to say that they've now acquired it and it's no longer considered stolen, right?
By tying it into.
Right, by tying it into the lulav and esrog. Okay, so the Gemara picks up there and says, "Kasavar lulav ein sarich egen." No, the point is that it must be that Rav Huna does not make the requirement of binding the lulav and esrog. That's the point. So by not making that requirement, therefore, according to Rav Huna, they still would be, by cutting it, those merchants would still.
Cutting it is.
No,
the
and
key.
then take it and
But
tying
tying
it.
it is the shimmering.
That's- That's the issue. That's the issue for Rav Huna. Okay, so what happens? He doesn't hold by that. Okay, so the Gemara picks up then and says the following. Hold on, Sam, I'm gonna come back to you. Ve'im timtze lomar, and if you want to say, says the Gemara, lulav tzrich eged, let's say you don't hold by Rav Huna's view, and you say that you do have to bind and tie it together. Shinui hachozer lebriatohus. Okay, that in essence is not a real valid change to consider these myrtle branches something brand new or different. And therefore that doesn't fulfill the requirement of kinyan. And because they're, in a sense, still myrtle branches that you're shaking with the lulav and esrog. Okay? And so
Because you're gonna take the binding off after Yom,
that may be, I don't
That's
know.
what the Gemara says.
That we'll see. I didn't get there yet. Hold on, let's not run ahead, guys.
okay?
Okay.
No, I'm just saying that's what the words.
Well, we don't know
Choser
that.
the brioso means.
Okay, shinui hachozer
choser the
lebrias,
brioso. It's gonna
that
go
comes
to its
back to its original status of being myrtle
You
branches.
can untie it, and therefore.
That
you
may
never-
be, but I don't see that in
That's
the
what the
Gemara.
words mean.
I don't see that in the Gemara. Okay, all right, so what happens? Okay, so let's go on.
Take a stolen property, make it not stolen.
Correct.
In other words, if I were to, okay, I'm gonna give you an answer this one, okay? If I'm going, okay, come on. I'll answer your question this way, then let's go back in the Gemara. Okay, if I steal something from you and I totally change what it is, okay? And in the course of time, you also have given up hope of getting it back. I now own that item. And the only thing, according to halacha, that I can remember that I'm required to do, since I can't return you the original item, I have to pay the knas. That I have
Pay
to
the
do.
value.
The value of the item that was stolen and the knas.
That's tomorrow's Gemara.
Okay? All right, but I don't want to jump ahead.
Is that still?
I'll explain it to
I
you.
don't want to jump ahead. Okay?
It's tomorrow's Gemara.
Okay? All right. Okay, so what happens? All right? Kasava lulav ein tzarich eged, we said. Ve'im timtzeh lomar lulav tzarich eged, shinui hachozer lebriato. V'shinui hachozer lebriato lo shmei shinui. And the Gemara tells us that any change, okay, in its status where it returns,
Where it can be undone.
okay? I don't see that here. You look at translation. Returns to its original form.
Any
Is-
change that can be reversed.
Where are you reading?
I'm reading Art Scroll, and the same Quran had the same thing.
I'm seeing that says it changed to its original form.
Yes,
That's the
because if I
translation.
tie something together, it's now a bundle. But if I cut the string, it's back to what it started.
To its original
So
form.
if I haven't made a change that is irreversible, it's not called a change. That's what the Gemara.
I'm saying, and that's what I'm saying also. So the Gemara raises the question, "V'liknuye b'shinui Hashem." So why not change it by giving it a different name,
Maybe
right?
the
Calling
name
it something else, okay? Right, so what happens? The mi'ikara havale asa, because originally it was called the myrtle, vahashta hoshana, and now we call it, so to speak, something else, a hoshana. But the Gemara tells us as we go over and briefly on the top of Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph, Hoshana, Me'ikara Nami La'asa Hoshana Karule, that people often called that same myrtle branch, they often called it by the name Hoshana as well. Okay, so we'll stop there on the top of Lamed Aleph, Amud Aleph.
No, I'm gonna explain the.
Okay.
Thank you, Reverend.
Okay.
Thank you, Reb.
Look, Shyness.
Good job.